Autumn arrived with its usual melancholy, painting the trees gold and red in the small residential neighborhood. Jasmine Doris stood before her bedroom window, watching dry leaves swirl in the air. The overcast sky seemed to mirror the state of her soul, gray but with small patches of light trying to break through the clouds. At 45, Jasmine was a respected graphic designer, known for her artistic sensitivity and keen eye for detail. Her curly brown hair framed a face with delicate features, where her green-gray eyes were, according to friends, windows to a deep soul. In the last 2 years, however, those eyes had lost some of their characteristic sparkle. "Today is the day," she murmured to herself, turning to face the wooden wardrobe in the corner of the room. It was an old piece of furniture made of dark oak, a gift from her grandmother. The left side had remained untouched since the departure of her ex-husband, like a small museum of memories she didn't have the courage to dismantle. Christopher Robin, a university professor of literature, had been her first true love. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a smile that lit up his strikingly featured face, he won Jasmine over not just with his appearance, but mainly with his contagious passion for books and the poetic way he viewed the world. Together for 8 years, married for 5, they shared dreams, built a home, and planned for a family that never came to be. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of sadness settle in her chest. It had been a happy marriage, filled with late-night conversations, breakfast in bed on Sundays, and plans for the future. Until 3 years ago, when the dream of a family began to crumble piece by piece. She still vividly remembered the day she found out she was pregnant, the pure happiness on Christopher's face, the way he embraced her carefully, as if she were made of crystal. For 12 weeks, they lived in a bubble of expectation. They set up a small room, bought the first teddy bear, and chose names. And then, on an ordinary Wednesday morning, it all ended. The bleeding, the rush to the hospital, the kind but definitive words of the doctor. "I'm sorry, you lost the baby." The emptiness that followed was devastating. Jasmine fell into a deep depression, isolating herself in her cocoon of pain. Christopher, on the other hand, didn't know how to reach her. He tried to be strong. He tried to console her. But each attempt seemed to only increase the distance between them. "You don't understand," she screamed one night after he suggested that maybe it was time to try again. "I felt our child inside me. You can't just replace him." Christopher remained silent, hurt, unable to express his own pain. In the following months, conversations dwindled. Sunday breakfasts ceased, and silence took over the house. Silence that, ironically, screamed louder than any argument. A year after the loss, Christopher finally packed his bags. "I don't know how to reach you anymore," he said simply, standing at the door in a small navy blue suit, the same one he had worn on their wedding day. "Maybe it's better this way." Jasmine did not respond. A part of her wanted to beg him to stay, to try once more, but pride and pain silenced her. She watched him leave through the window, a yellow taxi taking away 8 years of shared history. The divorce came 6 months later, too quiet for a love that had been so intense. Signatures on papers, division of assets, and then silence again. No contact, no messages, as if they had been mere distant acquaintances, not souls who once dreamed of growing old together. Now, 2 years after Christopher's departure, Jasmine finally felt ready for the last step, emptying that side of the closet, donating the clothes he had left behind, definitively closing that chapter. Carmen, her closest friend and owner of a small cafe in the city center, had insisted for months that she needed to do this. "Jasmine, dear, you need to create space in your life for new things." "Literally," she said, while serving a cappuccino during one of their weekly conversations. Jasmine opened the closet doors, and Christopher's characteristic scent, a mix of cedar cologne and old books, hit her like a wave. For a moment, she considered closing everything again and leaving it for another day. But no, she was determined. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, the scent of cedar and old paper flooding her senses like a memory she had tried too long to forget. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She wanted to walk away, to pretend this side of the closet didn't exist, to let the past stay folded behind dark oak doors. What if this opens everything I worked so hard to close, she thought. But then another voice, quieter yet more persistent, rose inside her. What if this is how it finally begins to heal? This wasn't just about clothes, it was about shedding the layers of silence, of pain she had carried like armor. Each folded shirt, each familiar scent, was a goodbye she had delayed far too long. So with a shaky breath and a heart thudding hard in her chest, Jasmine reached for the first shirt and didn't let go. Methodically, she began removing the shirts one by one, folding them carefully into a cardboard box. Each piece held a memory. The blue shirt he wore the first time he took her to meet his parents. The white one she used to iron every morning before his university classes. The plaid one he wore on lazy weekends. When she reached the suits, a lump formed in her throat. The last one, the navy blue, was just as he had left it the day he went out. Jasmine took it off the hanger carefully, allowing herself to embrace it briefly. She was about to place it in the box when she decided to check the pockets, an old habit from when she used to do his laundry, always worried he might forget some important note. It was at that moment that her fingers touched something that shouldn't have been there, a folded paper hidden in the inner pocket. Upon taking it out, Jasmine felt her heart race. It was a yellowed envelope, and on the front, written in red ink, was her name, in Christopher's unmistakable handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside, there were several sheets covered with his handwriting, dated 2 days before his departure. Jasmine sat at the edge of the bed, feeling her legs weaken, and began to read. Dear Jasmine, if you are reading this, it means that I have made the most difficult decision of my life, to leave you. Or perhaps it means that in a moment of cowardice, I was unable to deliver this letter in person and it remained forgotten in my pocket. There are so many things I need to say, so many words stuck in my throat for months. Words I try to utter when I watch you sleep, or when we pass each other in the kitchen, like strangers inhabiting the same space. First, I need you to know, I suffered too. Not in the same way you did, not by physically carrying that little life inside me, but I suffered. I dreamed of that baby. I imagined teaching him or her to walk, to read, to see beauty in ancient poems. In my mind, we were already 3. When we lost the baby, it felt like a part of me was ripped away. But I thought I needed to be strong for both of us, that showing my pain would only make yours heavier. Now I realize that was a mistake, that maybe you needed to see you weren't alone in your grief, that I was also carrying that absence every day. Jasmine, my love, I miss you so much. Not the Jasmine of now, distant and wrapped in silence, but the Jasmine who laughed until she was breathless, who painted on the walls when inspiration struck in the middle of the night, who argued with me about the endings of movies and always insisted her interpretation was the right one. I don't know if there is still a way back for us, if there is a bridge over this abyss we've created, but if one day you find this letter, and if there is still a small space for me in your heart, call me. My number will remain the same, just like my feelings for you. Maybe there is still time. With all the love that has always existed. Christopher. Jasmine let the sheets fall onto her lap, her hands trembling as tears spilled freely. Hot, heavy, and full of years she had spent burying words never spoken. Inside the envelope there was more. Little notes about moments he had kept in memory, things he loved about her, fears he had never managed to express. For hours she remained seated, rereading every word, letting them penetrate the layers of protection she had built around her heart. The letter revealed a side of Christopher she didn't know, or perhaps had forgotten, during the months of separation. A vulnerable man, as lost as she was in the maze of pain. It was already night when Jasmine finally reached for the phone. Her fingers hovered over the numbers, hesitant. Would it be crazy to call? 2 years had passed. He could be with someone else, could have completely moved on. But he asked, she whispered to herself, and I never knew. Before fear could paralyze her again, she dialed the familiar number. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then the voice she knew so well. Hello? Jasmine closed her eyes, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. Christopher, it's Jasmine. The silence on the other end seemed loaded with possibilities. When he finally spoke, his voice was choked. Jasmine, I wasn't expecting this. I found your letter, she said simply. In the pocket of the blue suit. Another silence. Longer this time. Ah, he finally replied, his voice almost a whisper. That letter. Why didn't you ever give it to me? I guess I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that it was too late, that my words couldn't fix what was broken between us. Jasmine gripped the phone tightly. I wish I had read it before, and I wish I had had the courage to deliver mine. The silence that followed was different from the silences that marked the end of their marriage. It wasn't empty or cold, but full of unspoken words, of possibilities. Do you still live in the same city? Jasmine finally asked. Yes, I accepted a permanent position at the local university. A pause. It's only 30 minutes from here. Jasmine took a deep breath. Do you think we could talk in person? I mean, the response came without hesitation. Yes, whenever you want. They agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe by the lake, a neutral and sufficiently public place to ease the pressure of the reunion. After hanging up, Jasmine felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope, mixed with an almost adolescent nervousness. The next morning, she dressed with care, not too formal, not too casual. She chose a simple dress in turquoise, Christopher's favorite color. She arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, choosing a table with a view of the lake, where small, colorful boats sailed peacefully. When she saw him entering, Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Christopher looked thinner, with some gray hairs at his temples that weren't there before, but his eyes, those deep brown eyes, were still the same. He spotted her and smiled, a hesitant smile, full of questions. Hi, he said, stopping in front of the table. Hi, replied Jasmine, gesturing to the chair across from her. The first few minutes were filled with cautious conversation, work, family, small updates on each other's lives. She found out that he was writing a book, something he had always dreamed of doing. She talked about her recent interest in photography, a hobby that had helped her process her emotions. But there was an elephant in the room, and they both knew it. Finally, Christopher gathered the courage. Jasmine, about the letter, about everything that happened. I never told you how I really felt either, she interrupted softly. I was so caught up in my own pain that I couldn't see yours. I shut myself off from you when we needed each other the most. Christopher reached out across the table, not touching hers, but close enough. We should have talked about everything. Yes, Jasmine agreed. But we were younger, more scared. And now, he asked, a clear vulnerability in his voice, are we different now? Jasmine reflected for a moment. I think so. At least I am. I've learned some things about grief, about communication, about not keeping everything inside until I explode. Me too, he said, finally lightly touching her fingers. Therapy. A lot of therapy. Jasmine smiled, feeling a connection she thought was lost forever. Both of us. The conversation flowed more easily after that. They talked about the shared pain, about the mistakes on both sides, about what they wished they had done differently. Hours passed like minutes, and when they realized it, the sun was starting to set, casting golden reflections on the lake. Can we continue this conversation another day? Christopher asked, a cautious hope in his eyes. Jasmine nodded. I would really like that. Christopher. In the weeks that followed, they met regularly, first in cafes and restaurants, then on walks in the park, and finally at her house for a homemade dinner. With each encounter, old wounds slowly scabbed over, and new laughter, began to take root. On a full moon night, sitting on the porch of the house they once shared, Christopher held Jasmine's hand firmly. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "I know we're just beginning to reconnect, but I want you to know, my feelings for you have never changed." Jasmine felt tears forming. "Neither have mine," she admitted. "Even when I tried to move on, even when I told myself it was over, a part of me always belonged to you." Christopher smiled, that smile that lit up his entire face. "So what do you think? Can we try again? Not exactly from the beginning, because we carry our history, but a new chapter." Jasmine didn't respond with words. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him softly, a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, understanding, and future possibilities. Months later, on a spring afternoon, Jasmine found Christopher in his old office, now transformed into a shared reading space. He was writing intently on his laptop. "What are you writing with so much dedication?" she asked, curious. Christopher smiled, pulling her onto his lap. "Our story, not exactly as it happened, but inspired by it. About how sometimes love hides in the most unexpected places, like in the pocket of a forgotten suit." Jasmine rested her forehead against his, feeling a deep gratitude for the path that had brought them there. It wasn't an easy or straightforward path, but it was theirs, with all the curves, obstacles, and unexpected beauties. "And how does it end?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Christopher kissed her forehead affectionately. "We're still writing that part together. It happened on a morning kissed by early spring light, the kind of day when the air smells like hope." Jasmine stood in front of the bathroom mirror, clutching the small test in her trembling hands. 2 lines, faint but unmistakable. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then came the tears, rolling silently down her cheeks, this time not from pain, but from the soft bloom of joy she never thought she'd feel again. When Christopher walked in moments later, a cup of tea in one hand and his usual sleepy grin, he stopped in his tracks at the sight of her. She simply held out the test. His eyes widened, the cup slipped slightly in his hand, sloshing tea onto the floor, unnoticed. "You're sure?" he whispered. She nodded, unable to speak. And then he was holding her arms tight, head buried in her shoulder, laughing and crying at once. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The silence between them had long since learned to speak in volumes. From that day on, he became her shadow, half sweet, half infuriating. He insisted on reading every book about pregnancy, prepared smoothies rich in nutrients she could barely pronounce, and took photos of her belly growing each week, labeling them like a proud archivist. He spoke to the baby every night, pressing his lips to her stomach, whispering stories and silly poems. And Jasmine? She felt herself expand, not just physically, but in every quiet corner of her heart. The grief, though never truly gone, now lived peacefully beside a joy that grew with every flutter, every kick. 9 months later, on a warm July afternoon, their daughter came into the world. Tiny, pink, loud, and perfect. They named her Ilara. In the hospital room, Jasmine cradled the baby against her chest, her forehead resting lightly on Christopher's. He had cried more than the newborn, and she teased him for it, though her own cheeks were wet too. At night, while the baby slept in her bassinet, Christopher took a photo. Jasmine in bed, hair messy, eyes glowing. Ilara curled peacefully on her chest. He titled it Home. And years later, when Ilara would ask them how she came to be, they would tell her not just about biology or chance, but about healing, second chances, and a letter in the pocket of an old suit that changed everything.